as leaders, we paint the picture. Like we give them the coloring book. Like here is what the vision looks like for our company. You can draw it any color you want.
You're listening to What Fuels You, where we deep dive with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to learn more about their stories and uncover nuggets of wisdom we can all use. I'm your host, Shauna Swerland, CEO of Fuel Talent, an award-winning recruiting firm based in Seattle. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Marc Rousso. Marc is an entrepreneur, mentor, and speaker. With his partner, Jay Mezistrano, he founded JayMarc Homes, a luxury home building company in Seattle. His passions are mentoring, speaking, DJing, and inspiring happiness around the world. He is happily married to his amazing wife, Leslie, and together they have two beautiful children, Lee and Siena. Welcome, Marc. So good to see you.
You too, Shauna.
It's awesome that we get to do this. This is many years in the making. I'm on year, I don't even know what of the podcast. And I have to say, I've been a little bit like this summer, I just took a pause and this is my first one back. And I'm super psyched that it's you because we're each other's people. This is so fun. Okay. I'm going to hit you with rapid fire. I think you've listened to the podcast. So I am curious if there's an app that you're really into right now, or what do you go to that's I have to have this on my phone?
Well, it's going to be corny, but it's Instagram. And I love it because I'm now watching Pickle Ball, all the Instagram reels of Pickle Ball so that I can learn how to be a better pickleball player because I'm into it now. And so that's my
I'm obsessed with pickle. I played in my first pickle tournament last year and it's so much fun, but we don't play it probably how it's supposed to be played. It's supposed to be a bunch of dinks.
It's it's the dinks. And well, because you and I played tennis with each other and you're incredible. And there is a lot of transfer of tennis to pickleball, but there's a lot of things that are completely different. And so
yeah, I'll play with you anytime. You tell me when.
Anyway, so I'm really enjoying the Instagram reels of pickleball because now that's all I'm getting on my feeds now.
Yeah. Okay. So Mr. DJ, if you could DJ anywhere with anyone, where would it be and who would you be DJing side by side with?
DJ with anyone, it would be Carl Cox. And it would be Super Paradisimo in Mykonos.
Oh, geez. So Carl Cox was here Saturday night.
He was.
Did you go?
No, I didn't go. He was here Saturday night.
I was supposed to go with friends and I couldn't get it together.
I love him. He's the best. And he's been doing it. He's been doing it for so long. And so that's kind of inspiration as a guy that's in his 50s to see Carl Cox almost in his 60s and just rocking out.
Yeah, he's cranking.
Yeah.
Okay. What is one of your books right now that you're suggesting, aside from Inspire Happiness, your book, a favorite business or personal growth book that you love to recommend?
Zero.
Say that again?
It's a book called Die with Zero.
Oh, Joel and Hada are reading that, our friends.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with it. It's basically living life instead of just saving for a rainy day all the time, right?
Yeah.
Ish.
We live to work. And this is it's getting to a place where you are enjoying your life rather than just working through life. And you don't die with zero. You give money to charity, you give money to your kids, but it's just figuring out how to have this remarkable life while we're still living it. And because there's no dress rehearsals, this is it. And so just enjoy.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying.
So it's more abundance mentality and less scarcity mentality, it sounds like, from what I got from their summary of it.
Yeah. And it's planning out that you don't need as much as you think that you need. And everyone works long and hard so that they can have as much money as possible. But the reality is in your 50s and 60s is when you spend it. And maybe in your 70s and 80s, you're slowing down a little bit. And so it's.
Except for us, we're going to be 80 to 90. We're switching. We're going up a generation.
That's right.
Up a decade.
That's right. That's right.
So Marc, what are the top 3 attributes that your team, not aspirationally would use to describe you, but truly would use to describe you?
How would they truly? I think that they would say that I genuinely care and that I am a leader. I have my name as in the company is called Captain Vision, and that I'm always thinking forward. And I think that they would say that they enjoy working for me because I'm always thinking about them and what's in their best interest.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how about your kids? What would they say? 3 attributes your kids would say
My
about their
kids.
dad
Oh, I think kids are your
on a
worst.
good day, on a good
I,
day,
I think
not
the kids are
teenager.
your kids are your worst critics. Like they're like, oh, Ted, you're such a knucklehead. What would they say? Is I always make time for them. They would talk about our family trips that we'd go on, and then the individual trip that I'm there for them.
I love that. Stable, steadfast. That's awesome. Is there anyone that you would, if you could, have lunch with from your past, someone that's either with us, not with us?
Mhm. My grandfather, Leon, he passed away when I was 18. And he was the man that spent like the most amount of time with me. He would take me to the movies on Shabbat or on Saturdays. And we would take the metro bus, go downtown, pick a movie. And he was just one of those soft spoken and just lovely, wonderful men. And I just wish I had more time with him.
Yeah. And he's your dad's dad?
Yeah, my dad's dad.
From Greece.
That's right. Yeah, from the island of Rhodes. He came here when he was 17 years old and was an entrepreneur and started working in the Pike Place market and ultimately owned his own stand. And it was just like what all young guys do, trying to make a life for themselves.
So he came over from Rhodes. How did he end up in Seattle? Sorry, this is rapid fire, but now I'm
well, he ended up
curious.
in Seattle because there's a large Sephardic Jewish community here. And he had someone that he knew that was living in Seattle and gave him housing. And ultimately, that's how he started. And he came and then he got his brother to come and sent money. And it was just one of those immigrant stories where he's just trying to find a better life for themselves. This was in
What kind of stand was it? You said he had a stand in Pike Place.
Yeah, so you had a fruit stand where the pig is across the street from where they throw the fish.
Yes.
So my grandfather had corner produce. So it was like prime time for like 40 years from like the 1930s to the 1970s.
Oh, wow. I'm sure I
And
was there. That's awesome.
yeah, you've walked by it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And so tons of younger men, Sephardic men that worked for my grandfather, and they always had these wonderful things to say about him. And he worked there. He worked in the Pike Place market until he was 88.
Wow. That is so cool. When we're not on the podcast, I'm gonna I want to drill down on this story. I love those stories. Okay, Mark, before we get into the actual podcast part, we're still in our rapid fire. We're still rapid firing. What is a guilty pleasure?
A guilty pleasure. I think my obsession with DJing, I feel guilty because I could just be lost in it. And it takes up so much time, but I love it.
And you're good at it. You're so good at it. It's so fun to watch you. You're like just completely in your element. So I'm curious, I know you talked about your grandfather and coming to Seattle. Where did you guys grow up? And you said that he was like a big influence. Who else was around you that was influencing you when you were little?
We grew up in Seattle, South Seattle. My grandparents lived in Seward Park, and my parents wanted to be close, but not too close. And so we grew up in South Seattle, and my grandparents were probably the biggest influence, obviously my mom and dad. And as I grew up, I had my cousin Saul, that was an influence that became a mentor. But those were the influence in my life.
Yeah. Were you into school? Were you like a good student, or were you just like, I got it? I just remember, I'm just thinking of how our kids are dealing, and it's so much harder now. Like school was important, but I just feel like you have to be so turbo these days.
That was, I don't know what it was like when you were in the tennis at time. My mom and dad, they made me work. So it was like as soon as I could like have a job, they were like, okay, you're working 20 to 30 hours a week. And that was like that was one thing that I think that they taught me, was just that work ethic and I had terrible jobs. I was like a bagger at Albertsons. I was a dishwasher at Longacres. I worked. And so it was like these jobs that were just, you had to show up and you had to put in the time, had to put in the effort. And I think that was one thing that I took away from my childhood, was just like, okay, you just got to your head focused and just to the grindstone.
Keep your head down and just stay focused. I have to say, I always say the same thing. Like, yes, I was playing tennis, but I also started working at 14, not in a way to like pay the bills, but just like that was a value. Like you work, that's just what you do. I worked mostly in retail, selling clothes, and I taught tennis at Bellevue Club and at Merson
Oh, you
Country
did?
Club. And then I had a ton of babysitting gigs. I joke that I was like the worst babysitter. I can't believe I kept getting, I would just like eat their food, not clean up, like watch TV. I don't know how I got asked back. A lot of the families where I was the babysitter. And it's so funny because I'm just like,
That's
how in
awesome.
the world did you have me come back? I think they thought maybe I was a good influence on the kids because I was like a good kid, I guess, at the time. I think that it's important to think about, like, I know that you're really big on mentoring others and having mentors. How old were you? You talked about your cousin, but how old were you when you had your first, I guess, mentor, or maybe were any teachers mentors or at least guiding you in some way?
I think that when I was at the University of Washington, I had a professor, Wheatley, and he was like the first, because at that time I had already started our first business, and he was the kind of like one of the first ones that said, you have something in you. And that really like made a lasting impression. And because I didn't have that kind of praise when I was younger, and so when someone that didn't need to made a point, I think it still hits me now. Like I get emotional when people make a point of actually giving you positive feedback. It makes a lasting impression.
So you were at UW, you studied business?
Business and speech communication, but really, that was a vehicle just to learn about entrepreneurship with Jay and I.
So you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur. You said, I know that you and Jay started DJing, you were like 20. So what is that, your sophomore year?
Yeah, sophomore, junior year. That was the thing that I learned the most, was just starting your first business and the successes and failures, and knowing that you can't get paid without actually being out there and persevering and getting out there and getting business and getting the rejection or the success. It was the best way of learning just that self-reliance, that you're not going to get a paycheck unless you just go out there and hustle. And I think
how did you know Jay?
Jay and I were in our fraternity together. We were roommates. And one summer, our first summer together, we're like, hey, we'd like to go work together. And he got a gig being a DJ, a wedding DJ in Whidbey Island. And he's like, hey, I'll pay you $25 if you come with me and you can just be my roadie. And I'm like, I didn't have anything to do that Saturday night. So we went out to Whidbey Island and I talked his ear off on the way back. I'm like, how much are you getting paid? You're getting paid $75. They're getting paid $400. Well, why don't we do this together and we could open up a DJ business? And he's like, it was like pummeling him to submission. And he finally said, okay, I guess we should start a business together. And that was almost 34 years ago that we started DJing. And
that's amazing.
Through college, that was probably greater than anything that I learned while
in the classroom.
Yeah,
for sure. Did you and Jay sit down? I'm always curious when people have business partners, because I've never had a business partner. I'm by myself, and that can be lonely. But also, I've always been scared to mess up a friendship or mess up a relationship. Like, what if we didn't iron out all the details in advance? Almost like going into a marriage. Like, do you get the prenup? Do you get all the things of like, well, what if I want something different than you want, or you don't work as hard, or whatever those things are? Did you guys, you're 20 at the time? Did you talk through anything, or was it just like, hey, dude, you're cool, I'm cool, we're both driven, let's go?
What was interesting is that we both found what made us successful. Like, he was great at DJing. Like, he DJ'd in a rap band when he was a teenager. And so he was the DJ and I could go sell. And he loved all the behind the scenes. Like, he loved dealing with all the equipment or putting up signs in the middle of the night. And he was really the hard worker. And I was like, okay, well, I'm the kind of the creative or the vision of it, but I'd have to go sell. So if I didn't sell, we'd have no DJ gigs. And it's been that way for 34 years, where he's been an amazing business partner, because he grinds and he works really hard and he lets me be in the clouds. And it's a fantastic compliment. And
It seems like it's an incredible partner, obviously long lasting. It's like in dog years. I don't even know. It's crazy.
yeah, it is awesome. And there's obviously in 34 years, 35 years, there's adversity that we both go through together and separate, and that affects how hard we work. And like when we lost it all during 2008, 9, and 10, that brought us closer together because we had no one else.
Yeah, you were in it together. I would definitely want to get into that. That's actually when I remember the conversation vividly that you and I had on the side of the field. I don't know if you remember it. I had just moved back to Seattle and you were like, I lost everything. And I was like, oh my God, dude, me too. You're like, no, I don't think you get it. I lost everything. And I was like, oh, and we started talking about it because I had gotten hit also, not like you, but also gotten hit financially. It was a crazy time. But I'm so fascinated by these business partnerships because you both find your lane, but you're a person who's so intentional, so goal oriented, so focused and driven. Is that an expectation that you have of just the way you operate, or do you bake that into the partnership, the culture of the company? Does everybody subscribe to that way of thinking? Or is it just like, no, this is my jam. This is what works for me?
It's what works for me. And then I think my job is to push, pull, and to guide people and to show them the vision. And if they're not doing it, then I'm not showing them. If they're not following suit, then I didn't paint a good enough vision for what it is that I want the future to look like. And I think that what was over the course of years, it's also my expectations. I think early on, I wanted things to work faster. And then as I got older and I realized that maybe it's just like a slow and easygoing approach rather than always constantly trying to grind people to make things happen. It has to come organically. And I think that is probably what I learned the most after 30 years being a business partner or as being a leader of a company, is that when people can think about it themselves and come up with it as their own idea, they get buy-in. But if I tell them what to do, it doesn't necessarily happen. And so I think that's what I've learned probably the most, whether it's a partnership or being a leader of a company, is that when it's organic and it comes
like more of a, you talk about servant leadership. I know that you're big on that, kind of getting beneath people to help them fly versus top down and being like, hey, this is what needs to get done. Yeah, I think that's great. I know you and Jay sold the DJ business. I read this. I loved this. And I didn't know this until preparing for the podcast. You sold it for $15,000. You started investing in real estate, ended up with 30 rentals, which is fucking insane. That's insane. Like, how do you have the confidence and grit and perseverance to do that? Like, I think most people would be a little more risk averse. I guess you're young and just like, fuck it, let's go.
Well, you have to start with your first one. That's where the mentors come in. And my mentor Saul had dozens of rentals. And so I always knew when I was 24 years old, I was like, okay, well, that seems like the next logical business. And I met another gentleman. His name was Raymond. And Raymond, was an Asian, Chinese, from China. He was an immigrant and he was same age as me. And he had like 8 to 10 rentals. And I'm like, well, how do you do it? And so he taught Jay and I the formula of adding bedrooms and bathrooms. And so Jay and I bought our first house when we were 24. We bought our second house. We bought 3 houses when we sold that DJ business. One for 77 grand on Rainer Avenue, one for $95,000 in Renton Highlands, a duplex, and one in Beacon Hill for $95,000. And we used that money, some other money, some real estate commissions. We bought all these rentals, and then we're like, okay, well, it's time for us to add bedrooms and bathrooms and turn them into rentals. And then that's when we were off. And so we were rapid fire into this. Like, we made a ton of mistakes. Like, we didn't have enough money to remodel it. And so we're like, what are we going to do? One of the houses we didn't remodel, so we just kept it as is and still was able to rent it out. But I think it was just starting. And too often I think that we think, well, how do I just get going in anything? It's just by doing one, and then that ultimately leads to many. Like, I didn't buy 30 out. It took us 7 years to buy 30 houses.
It's still incredible. Max, our son, is really into this, and he's had a few meetings with real estate developers to say and people who have just done this for a living, like invested. And he's like, why doesn't everyone do it? It takes courage and it takes vision and it takes a willingness to learn from mistakes. Just like in my mind, I would be intimidated thinking, well, I don't know how to do that. I better know how to do that and then do it. And it's like your trial by fire, just like, I'll just figure it out. And so why did you guys decide to pivot and get it more into like land development and building land from raw land?
So we had acquired all these houses and they were rentals but one of those houses had a little bit of land on it. And we realized that if we separated the land, the house remained the same value. So we're like, okay, well, let's find other houses that are like that. So one of our houses had one house plus a lot. And then we ended up building on that lot. And then we had another house that could be a house plus 2 lots. And so we learned the short plat process, which is land development. And then we bought the property across the street, and that was a house plus 3 lots. And then we brought the house down the street from that, and it was a house plus 2 lots, and a house plus 4 lots, a house plus 8 lots. And that was like, we learned the land development business just by starting super, super small. And we were both before we started the land development business, Jay was working at his family's furniture store, and I was selling residential real estate. And at the time, we acquired 14 lots, and I went back to Jay and I said, hey, let's try to do this full time. And then once we started doing it full time, it was like lights out. We bought 3 8-lot projects. We bought a 24-lot project. We bought like multiple 20-lot projects. We bought a 50-lot project.
And what are you doing this with? Like, what money are you using?
So we ended up, so over the course of 7 years, we ended up having like millions of dollars of equity in all of those rental houses. And then we were able to get a line of credit to then be able to put options on all of these properties. And so it was like using the option game. So if I bought a 10-lot short plat, I could say, okay, well, I'm going to give you 50 grand or 100 grand, and I'm going to take it through the municipality and ultimately create a neighborhood, but I have to do it on paper first. And that takes a couple years. So that was what we were doing. As creating a land development business, we were buying raw land as options from landowners. And then once we took it through the municipality, we would close on it and or sell it to home builders.
Wow. Who's the person doing all the spreadsheets and learning? And like, I'm so curious on all that, because I just try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me in all these areas. And your business partners, you're learning side by side. You each have your skill sets, but who's got that skill set?
Well, we ended up, when we were creating the land development business, we ended up relying a lot on our engineer and the planners. And so they become your partners, and you're leaning on them of saying, hey, I found this 2-acre parcel. What can I do with it? And so he probably from 1999 to 2024, he still worked to us today. Like we have a 25-year relationship with that man. Like Jay and I are business partners, but I relied on him every single time we had a raw piece of land, raw piece of dirt, of like telling us what we needed to do. And I think that we do that in business. Like we find people that we can rely on that can give us great feedback and advice on what we need to get done. And I've surrounded myself like with those kind of people in every aspect. And so his name's Eric Labrie. And I would call Eric when we had a piece of land, and he would basically take it for us and go through the municipalities. But then we surrounded ourselves with finance people, with project managers. Like you talk about organization. I'm not the organizational guy. I'm the vision guy. So we had somebody that all they would do was manage all of our projects. At the height of the market, we probably had 12, 14 projects going on simultaneously.
And what year was that, the height of the market?
2007.
And then how did you know that you were like, this shit was hitting the fan? Like, what's the first indicator of that? And what does that kind of period of time look like for you?
2007, we had a project that we were trying to sell, and we started to see that the developers that couldn't get financing, and the project went in and out of contract multiple times, and ultimately that was like our demise because we weren't able to sell that project And then it was like a domino effect, on multiple levels, like because we had a lot of cash. In that particular one, we bought the property from the homeowners, and then we weren't able to sell it. And then the cash is king when you go through downturns, is we were never able to get our cash back out to be able to support us while other things were falling.
And were you in EO at the time, Entrepreneurs Organization?
Mm-hmm. I was.
And so I'm guessing that your forum and other people around you helped you through the trauma of that. I actually just got back from my forum retreat with my YPO forum retreat, and we read the book Strength to Strength. I don't know if you've read it.
What's it about?
It's basically like this half of life, right? After 50, how you operate differently and how to create strength out of that. And one of the questions that we were posed with, that we all asked each other, was what we were most driven by. Is it pleasure? Is it money? Is it power? Or is it honor? Which is, I was like, oh God, I want all of them, except for power. I don't care about power. But money is like, what does that represent? Right. And how did that feel for you at that time? Pleasure is like, well, fuck, I guess I'm not going to be having fun. I have no money. And then there's honor. Like, what do people think of me? Right. How am I perceived now in the community? What was going through your mind at that time as your kind of top fear-based driver?
At the time, it was losing my identity, because once that domino didn't fall, it then led to the banks coming after us and saying, hey, we want our money back. It was like, so as we were starting to unwind, they're like, okay, you need to sell your rentals in order to pay back the debt that we had. And it was like a domino effect. And so I lost my identity in it. And so I guess you could say that maybe that's honor if you're using your 3 buckets. But at the end, so we liquidated all of our rental properties, and I guess honor again, we owed the bank $2.5 million. And once we liquidated all of our rentals, and we told the bank, hey, if you give us 20 years, we'll pay you back your $2.5 million. But we don't know how we're going to pay it back yet. But if you just give us that time. And because we wanted to be men of our word and men of honor. And so the hard part in that instant was my identity was all of those rental properties. My identity was in the business. And I think that, like, on a deep level, like that was one of the greatest lessons of losing it all, was why was I trying to chase? And what I was really trying to chase was money. Like that was because I thought that money would buy me, in the time, and money would buy me respect from my dad. Money would buy me approval. And if I made a ton of money, then my dad would be like, okay, well, now I'm proud of my dad. I'm proud of my son. And I think it was like a $10 million lesson. It was like, no one can make you feel proud of yourself, but yourself. And I think that's, my honor was first, but I was chasing the money. And I think that
we got into that, right? We got into like, what is me? Is that freedom? For most people, it's freedom, but it's also security. And then there's the part that's the kind of like, we don't want to admit, the ego part of, I'm worthy. I've done something, especially when you've made it yourself.
For sure.
So that makes sense completely.
And so what did that resonate with you? Like, what did you see yourself and your transformation?
Well, like I think that there's a lot of work that people constantly talk about like how great it is, the freedom of being in your 50s, because you don't care what anybody thinks anymore. And I'm like, well, I'm 52, almost 53, and I still care. And I don't know when that comes. I think that would be amazing to not care. But the word honor can be confusing, right? Because it's like, it's not necessarily being honorable. It's just caring, I think, what people think of you. Anyway, we can go off on tangents. You and I could talk for hours about that. So tell me, so you learned a ton from this. How did you have the confidence and gumption? And how did you and Jay, like, were you on the same page? Like, let's go back at it to start in the luxury home business, the custom home business?
To be honest, it was humbling. And starting from scratch is not easy. And starting in a business that we didn't even have history in. And, but we had a vision. We had a vision of that we could be home builders, because we were guiding home builders when they were buying our land. And we knew what home builders should do when they bought our projects. And it was just they had to then go build it. So we had an idea of what to do. How to do it was the challenge. So we started surrounding ourselves with, we made a decision. We were going to be home builders. And the last remaining assets that Jay and I had were our two luxury SUVs that we had paid cash for. We sold those two vehicles and we got $100,000. And we put $50,000 down on one project. We put $50,000 down on another project. And we were buying these projects from the bank because they had all the land at the time. And we knew that we were going to be home builders. And now I had to raise $1 million to buy those two projects. And I had never raised money before because all this was Jay and I at the time. And it is a humbling experience when I sent out 300 letters to all the emails to everyone that I knew. And I got one person, two people that said, okay, we'll invest. And they were two of my mentors, Howard Behar and Gordon McFadden. And they were my first two investors. But I still had to raise like a ton more.
A lot more. Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself was the hardest part because I'm like depressed trying to raise. I'm depressed because of what I just went through and have to show this vision and the strength to like raise the capital. And so once we decided that we were putting money down, it was like throwing our hat over the fence, and we had no other way to like go but forward. And I think that was the start of us just believing in each other of like, okay, we're in it together. Whatever is going to happen, but we're going to put forth 150%. And those were long years, hard years.
And when did you feel, I'm hoping you do now feel successful, but when did you first realize like, holy shit, we're like good at this? Because I know you care deeply about your culture as a company.
Mm-hmm.
You care deeply about the customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
You care obviously about the final product, the actual homes.
Mm-hmm.
But those are a lot of things to think about in a new industry that you don't know.
Yeah.
And building a whole company, right? Sure. So when did you look at each other and go, I think we actually have something here?
I think that I don't think we knew that we had something for years. It took probably 6 years for us to feel like we were successful. And that was, we first started out in Renton building $359,000 houses. And then we saw an opportunity to come into Bellevue and Mercer Island and buy tear down houses and build new on top. And we looked at it from the perspective of we wanted to be able to control our own market. If we went out to the outskirts of Renton or Sammamish or any of these, like there are tons of national home builders that we would compete against. We wanted to be like the bigger player in our market. So we started raising money, and then we partnered with a private equity, a family office out of Vancouver. And we bought 20 lots in Bellevue. We bought 20 lots on Mercer Island. And in 2011, 12, 13 was like when we made a big push into having velocity in building infill houses. Very few builders at the time were building 15, 20 infill houses. They maybe build like 3 or 4 a year. So we were trying to make a business out of it. Doing that, there was a lot of learning curves because you couldn't just buy, they didn't close at the same time. And you didn't have construction schedules that were easy to work through. And so cash flow was really challenging for the first 4 or 5, 6 years. And we're trying to grow and build and hire people. And so finally,
which is super hard. I need to hear about this, but that's so funny. You said hire people, because I was like, how in the world do you get people to come work for you? Like set the vision for them and recruit. And then also I know that you've done a really good job of retaining talent. Like what's your strategy on recruiting?
Well, at the time it was just trying to find we tried to find a great superintendent, and we tried to find a great CFO. And we started building the business based on a great person that was in purchasing. And so the company was built on the backs of people who had amazing experience, and you just need one to believe in you. And it's like, once they see one person that believes in you, then another person believes in you. And it was like, then they start to see the vision. And we were very transparent about our successes and our challenges. And I think that's part of retention, is that when we are we're not just saying how things are great, we're saying the highs and the lows of how the business is doing, and people feel a part of it when they see you successful and that they were the ones that helped make that happen. And then that just snowballs of when you hire one great person and another, they recruit other people to be a part of it. And I think I've mentioned to you before, like we've never used a recruiter in our 14 years of business. Our recruitment is the people that work inside of our company. Like I'd say 90% of the people that come and work for JayMarc are friends with somebody else that's inside the company. And that's been the key to success, is just like, hey, we have a job opening, and they don't come up very often, but people want to come work with people that they know and they feel valued. It took one person, and then like we have a president that manages the day-to-day. He's been with us 10 years. We have a CFO that is his kind of like his partner, or Jay and I's partner, and they manage the day-to-day. And I think that was probably what guided us towards success, is having other people that were masters in what it is that they did. Because you remember you and I were talking about just now about having, like, how do you know that you're doing the right thing, or how do you just let go? Is that when you hire people that they are much better at it than Jay and I, and let them do what they do, like they guide us towards success. And I think that when Jay and I let go, like Ron is his name. Ron, he's got 35 years of experience in the home building industry. Catherine, our CFO, has 20 years of experience. And so when we let go of the business to let them lead it, that's when success happened.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, and this is me selfishly getting some tips from you, because when I think about doing anything like that, I get worried about the culture, the voice, the kind of nuancy things, because there's definitely people who are stronger than me operationally.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you let go of that part too? Or you say, hey, like, color within this, here's the lines. I'm not going to color for you, but just go within here. Or you just let it rip for them?
I think that as leaders, as CEOs like you and I are, is that we paint the picture. Like we give them the coloring book, like, hey, here is what the vision looks like for our company. You can draw it any color you want. And I think that once you have the strong values, which I know that you do, like your company is extraordinary for having like one of the best places to work, and the values and the culture and all the things that you've done, like that was your job, or that is your job, and you've done it. And all the day-to-day stuff, like that is where I've let other people handle all of that, and they do it so much better than I do. And but that then has given me the freedom to do the other things and be who it is that I want to be as a husband and as a father and as a leader. And I think that's like, it's correlated. It's by letting go, you actually give yourself the freedom of being who you want to be in the world.
Yeah. And so what do the next 5 to 10 years look like for you and for JayMarc? Let's talk about JayMarc first, and then I want to talk about you.
We have a great custom home business, and we build luxury homes in Bellevue, Mercer Island for families. And we've created an amazing system that allows people to build custom homes on time and on budget. And we saw that there was a real void because people always told us about their horror stories in building custom homes. And I think after 7 years, we finally perfected it, like that people can come in, they work with one of our architects, they work with one of our interior designers, they go through the process. It's on the budget that they want it to be, in the budget that they want it to be. And I think that's what our future looks like, is that we're going to keep on doing that over a long period of time. And we're not looking to be the biggest. We just want to have consistent and constant growth. And that's what I've been taught, is just being, because as all entrepreneurs, we have this gumption of like, we want to grow. But one of my mentors, Jeff Gow, he said, Mark, if you just stayed consistent and constant for a long period of time, you're not investing all of that money in growth, because it costs money in order to grow. But if you're consistent and constant, you finally have your payroll and you'll finally have your payroll in check, that ultimately you're able to reap the benefits of sale.
And I read that you said Andy Liu talking about the getting on first. I loved that. Just get on base versus trying for the home run. And I think that's a great analogy, a sports analogy. Okay, so I'm just curious, Mark, are you going to continue on with the DJ thing? You're crushing it. And I also know you have a lot of other goals, and I want to talk about Inspire Happiness. Where does the DJing thing fit for the next 5, 10 years?
For the next 5 to 10 years, well, what I've enjoying about the DJing is it's a creative goal that I was able to set about 5 years ago and work to accomplish it. And everything that I've ever thought about happening, it was ultimately created. I got to open for Claptone in Houston and Dallas and Aspen, and I got to open for Fatboy Slim in Miami. And it was just like everything about it it was perfect. And I couldn't have asked for a better realization of this goal that I set. And I realized that, yes, I set it, like I did it. I didn't need to do any more. Wife and 2 kids. I didn't want to keep on traveling. And so the last few years after that has just been DJing local events, but also fundraisers. Last month, I DJed in Coeur d'Alene for the Spokane Cancer Fund with our
You
friends.
guys raised like over $1 million, right?
Yeah, they raised a couple $1 million. Like it was,
my brother said it was just incredible.
it was awesome. I loved hanging out with your brother. It was Billy Idol, the Wallflowers, and then I got to DJ afterwards.
Oh, it's so cool.
And then last month as well, I had DJed for Obliteride in honor
that's
of
awesome.
our good friend Joey. And so those are the things that I'm doing. I'm going back to Spokane and doing that for the Cancer Association in Spokane for their fun run.
I find it like super motivational watching you set these goals. And now you're talking about pickleball. I feel like a lot of people would just be like, let me just get a place in Palm Springs, the desert, or Arizona, wherever, and just go play some pickle, play some golf. And you're setting these new goals. You came out with your book called Inspire Happiness, which I love. I find these things somewhat challenging for me to like slow my brain enough to figure out not just what I want, but like my why. Mm-hmm. And I did the exercise of like finding my 3 to 5 values. I couldn't land on anything. I might need to hire you to be my coach. Mm-hmm. Have you landed on your 3 to 5 values? I'm guessing you have. And do they change?
When we set the intentions of like working on this, it takes work. You have to be in the right frame of mind to go through
100%.
But it's really, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I've asked myself these questions, like, what's going well in my life? What am I most dissatisfied with? What am I happy with? And if there's something I could work on, what would it be and why? And I kept on doing this over and over again. And I just I'd use these black books and I'd ask these questions. And then, so I finally was starting to mentor other entrepreneurs, and they were like, well, it'd be better if you just had it in a workbook and you'd.
Yeah, no, it's so good, Mark. I literally want to buy them for my forum. Have you come to my YPO forum, my EO forum? Like everybody knows you already, but it might be too close. But like if this is just super cool. And I'm thinking that a lot of people, and maybe this is not true, I'm curious on this kind of wheel of relationship, family, physical, financial, mental, spiritual, social, and career. Mm-hmm. Do you find that you're always, I'm guessing, a little stronger in certain areas? Like I'm guessing career. That's just like some people I've always shared, like my career has always been my jam. Like that's me and my I'm always going to flow in business. Mm-hmm. And these other areas, social is always like always strong for me. Mm-hmm. But these other areas are like, you know what? I loved reading some of your stuff. Like I want those one-on-one times. I want to seal in the bond with my kids and my family of origin and my husband, all of those things. How do you rank yourself? I'm guessing if you're self-reporting, it's consistent every year and you can see growth or decline in certain areas.
Yeah, I think that I think that what's important about that wheel is that we look at it for ourselves and say, okay, my social is really high, my career is really high, and maybe my contribution or my family is low or whatever it may be. And it's for us to is like, okay, well, how could I move the needle? What would be like one thing that we could do? And so it's like the wheel is a visual, and there's 8 areas of your life. There's our family life, physical life, financial, mental, spiritual, social, career, and relationship. And relationship is with our spouse. And too often we lump family and relationship in one, but relationship takes its own bucket. Like, what are you going to do to be an amazing partner? And because if we don't do something just for our spouses, it ends up things falter, right?
Well, then the family kind of falls. Yeah. For sure.
And so in life, there's certain, it's like sometimes business is high, sometimes business is low. It's not always a constant.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking physical too, when you're like, I'm guessing the year you did your half Ironman that you're like physical's high, but in other ways it's also low because you're probably like, oh my God, my hips and my knees are killing. Like I'm always, the physical is always on there somewhere. Spiritual is one that's like challenging. I definitely want to like dig into this with you. I had a lot of fun looking at it. What's on your bucket list? Because I know that's in there also. Do you have these crazy things, and what's happening in 2025 for you aside from Ibiza?
I was to just start thinking about the bucket lists. It's really how I can make a difference in people's lives with this book. And I've had the fortune of having some amazing mentors, Warren Rustin, Howard Behar, and like they have given me a platform. My cousin Saul, like these guys have given of themselves to me. And like, I feel it's like my job to then give back to the younger entrepreneurs or our peers and be able to look at life differently. That's why I wrote this book, is that we spend so much time on working on our business plans, but how much time do we spend on mapping out what we want for life? Like I love it. Right? For our business plan, we will spend weeks preparing for a company meeting and in every aspect of the business. And then we will monitor ourselves on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis. And we're like, how are we tracking? What are we doing? How are we going to get this done? What if we did that for our own lives? What if we looked at every single area of our life and said, okay, what do we want to get done for this week, this month, this quarter, this year? What does 3 years look like? And I think that's what's missing in a lot of, that's what could give people that next level of happiness in their life.
Oh, for sure. Much more fulfillment because it's like, they're more well-rounded. No, I love this. I'm super energized by it. And I'm guessing that we have the luxury of kind of perspective now, right? With having so many years of work, so many experiences, losing friends, losing businesses, lots of gains along the way. I'm curious, 2 questions. They might be the same, they might be different. One is like around legacy that you hope to leave behind, like how you want people to think of you. And the second is, I ask everyone, like, what fuels you? I'm guessing they're going to change.
I think that if I was to leave a legacy, it was just always about like generosity and giving back. And that people was like, yeah, Marc was a super thoughtful and generous guy. And what fuels me is, I think that actually what fuels me is different than my legacy. What fuels me is the ongoing pursuit of something. And I think that's what goals have, that's what feeds me for goals, is that I'm always moving towards something. And it's not, and then like you and I just talked about, it's not about the money. It's about all those other areas of your life that you want to make change in, and you find happiness.
Yeah. I always find, honestly, this is like genuine coming from me to you. Like I always find a little nugget every time I talk to you. You've got a lot of wisdom and a lot to offer, and you are super generous with giving feedback. You were helpful to me during COVID and the business. And I'm just wishing you tons and tons of success, and very grateful that you took the time to be on the podcast.
Thanks, Shauna.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. If you'd like to check out past episodes to hear from more business leaders, go to fueltalent.com/podcast. And if you have a minute, please leave a review and rating on your favorite podcast app, or share this episode with a friend or colleague. Please share any feedback or interview suggestions for other guests by sending a message to podcast@fueltalent.com. I'm Shauna Swerland, and thanks again for listening.